Hi everyone, welcome. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Before I turn it over to Catherine Patterson from the De Beaumont Foundation, we just wanted to say welcome to this webinar on the Pre-K 2019 Medal Preview brought to you by CityHealth and NIEER. Before we go into the content, we just wanted to do a quick housekeeping note that this webinar is being recorded. And we encourage you to submit questions to the Q&A, which on your screen you can see the details for how to do that. So you can click on the chat bubble to open the chat box and then send us your questions. If you for some reason can't hear us, if you can't see the screen, if some problem occurs, please use the raise your hand function and I will be happy to reach out to you as the moderator and help in any way that I can. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Catherine.
Hey everyone, welcome. Good afternoon, I think, to most of us. Good morning, if it's still morning where you are. I'm Catherine Patterson. I'm the Director of Operations here at CityHealth, and we are delighted today to have you all with us as we talk about the 2019 Pre-K medals. I have Gigi Weisenfeld with us today, Assistant Research Professor at the National Institute for Early Education Research, otherwise known as NIEER. And I also have my colleague Liz Voiles, who's the Vice President of Communications with CityHealth. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give folks a very brief overview of what CityHealth is and then how Pre-K fits into the overall policy menu. So I'm not going to read to you from the screen. I promise not to do that to you. But essentially, CityHealth is a project that is really trying to look at those policies that can be passed at the city level that can impact things like where you work, where you pray, where you eat, and how you essentially are surrounded by a policy environment that can help all urban residents live healthy, thriving lives. And as part of that policy menu, we have developed a package of 9 policy recommendations that are all evidence-based, that are really trying to look at all of those different domains that I just mentioned. Next slide. So what are those 9 policies? You know, here at CityHealth, we look at everything from a complete streets policy, which really drills down and looks at what are those policies that can help folks walk, bike, ride in a car, and ride on public transportation in a safe and efficient way. We also look at municipal healthy food procurement policies, which mean that we are trying to maintain and expand access to safe and healthy food on municipal properties like parks and government buildings. We have a couple of tobacco control policies on the menu, things like smoke-free indoor air and Tobacco 21, which is the raising of the age of purchasing of tobacco from 18 to 21. We also have food safety and restaurant inspection ratings on here, essentially so consumers have the option to look at the health and cleanliness of the places in which we eat. We have safer alcohol sales control on here, which is really looking at the intersection of the density of areas that offer liquor sales and the intersection there with crime and public safety. We have affordable housing on here, which is really looking at the ways in which we can make sure that there is enough affordable housing stock for city residents to take advantage of. And then also policies like sick leave, which make sure that when folks are ill or when family members are ill, they have the opportunity to stay home and care for them or to get well themselves and not infect others. And then finally, which is the reason why we're all here today, we have access to high quality preschool, which is an incredibly important policy, not only of the 9, but also in terms of you all who are with us today. And we're going to drill down today into how those pre-K medals are determined. We're not going to get into specific city level medals, but we are going to talk about the overall process that we use. And then we will share a little bit about how we will communicate that with an external audience. Next slide, please. So what exactly is CityHealth doing in terms of looking at the policies that cities have on the books? We work specifically in the 40 largest cities here in the United States, and we look at both the number and the quality of policies that are on the books. We also then don't just rate cities. We actually provide direct technical assistance or assistance in the form of public opinion polling or something like support for local advocacy groups or coalitions to actually pass these specific 9 policies, and honestly look for ways to look at momentum within large cities and to help advance goals that have already been identified by the community. Next slide, please. So how do we talk about overall medals and how do we calculate that? What are those cutoff points? You know, for cities that have received 5 or more gold medals across each of the 9 policies, they then receive a gold medal. For cities that have received 5 or more gold or silver medals, they then qualify for an overall silver medal. And then for cities who have received 4 or more gold, silver, or bronze medals across each of the 9 policies, they then earn a bronze. And if you did not meet that criteria, then we do not award the city an overall medal. So at this point, we're going to dig into the exact process for how the pre-K quality benchmarks were determined. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Gigi Weisenfeld. Gigi?
Thank you so much, Catherine. As Catherine said, my name is Gigi Weisenfeld, and I'm a researcher at NIEER, which is housed at Rutgers University. I've been working on the City Health project for several years now. This is our 3rd round of medals. But recently, we expanded our work with the support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and the De Beaumont Foundation, along with this incredible CityHealth team, by creating a CityHealth through Pre-K network. And some of you have been involved and active in that, and we're grateful. But in addition to the CityHealth work, I work at NIEER as one of the authors of the State of Preschool Yearbook, which I'll be talking about shortly. I also work on the Cost of Preschool Quality and Revenue tool, which is a calculator that helps estimate the cost of implementing high-quality preschool and provide technical assistance to both states and advocates working on expanding preschool. And we can actually go to the next slide. So we have to start really by defining which pre-K programs we're going to look at. As many of us know on this call, early childhood has a range of funding streams and types of programs. So in order to narrow our focus and to really be all on the same page, we used NIEER's definition of state programs and applied that to the city level. Basically, we looked at programs that were predominantly funded through city, local, and/or state dollars, not federally funded programs, such as Head Start or Title I or CCDF dollars or IDA Part B, which funds special ed preschool. Of course, some of these funds may be combined with the state or city dollars. We also only looked at center-based programs that focus on early childhood education for 4-year-olds. And all of this longer description is also available in our State of Preschool Yearbook. Next slide. So for the CityHealth project, we evaluated 2 criteria. The first, enrollment, and the second, the quality of the pre-K programs within the city, again, using the definition we just discussed. Next slide. So for enrollment, the number of 4-year-olds within the city was determined by looking at the 2010 U.S. Census data. I know some cities have more up-to-date data, but in order to be on the same playing field and for everyone to have the same foundation, we used that number. We then added up the unduplicated counts of slots available for children in all of the state-funded programs that operate within the city and all of the city-funded programs. Next, we divided to determine the city enrollment by the number of 4-year-olds to calculate the percentage of children served within the city. Our threshold was 30%. This percentage is based on the national enrollment of 4-year-olds enrolled in state-funded pre-K. We also did not take into account other programs, as I just mentioned, like Head Start or Title I. But it is really important to mention and to emphasize that this number is still way too low. Next slide. And this is the part that gets a little more complicated, determining quality. At NIEER, we've developed a rating system based on research that tells us what the conditions or policies are necessary to support preschool that will lead to positive child outcomes. We have identified 10 benchmarks, which are listed here. In the next few slides, I will go through in more detail explaining the criteria used to determine whether or not the pre-K program met the benchmark. If you would like to see the research that accompanies these benchmarks and a lot more information, you can look at our State of Preschool Yearbook, and there's a picture of the cover of it on this slide. Next. So each state has a set of early learning standards. These are typically used at the city level as well. The learning standards should be culturally sensitive and aligned with the state's infant toddler standards if they exist, as well as the K-2 standards, such as Common Core, as well as in addition to any child assessments used. We have also looked at how the standards are supported by the state and the city, such as having resources available for professional development opportunities to learn how best to implement them. Next. In many instances, the state does not require or support the implementation of pre-K curricula, but the city does. So we looked at how the city supports the selection and implementation of the curriculum. If the state does support its selection and use, we then looked at how this was implemented at the city level. Next. Professional development. This is probably one of the most challenging benchmarks to meet. Not only do both the lead teacher and assistant need to have at least 15 hours of professional development annually, but they also have to have written individual annual professional development plans. The part that also gets tricky is the coaching element. We have found that sometimes this is offered at the city level, but not at the state level. So I know many of you were providing information about that, which was extremely helpful. It's also important to emphasize that the coaching needs to happen not only in one setting, such as in public schools, but also in the community-based providers, and that it's offered for all teachers and required for all teachers throughout the pre-K program. Next slide. The second challenging benchmark for programs to meet. The continuous quality improvement system entails having classroom observations using a valid and reliable tool. Some of the common ones are ECHRS or CLASS in either randomly selected classrooms or low-performing classrooms. Just selecting new classrooms does not qualify. It also includes having these observations done regularly, at least every 3 years. Finally, the data collected from the observations needs to be used at both the classroom or program level, as well as the city or state level for program improvement. So it really is a system of quality improvement. Next slide. 3 benchmarks are directly related to teacher qualifications. The teachers must have a BA in all settings, again, meaning those housed in public schools and community-based preschools, as well as specialization working with pre-K aged children. For assistance, we look at having a CDA or equivalent, and the equivalent can be defined as such as 12 hours of ECE college credits or an AA degree or higher, but the AA degree or higher must be in an ECE or related field. Just passing a test without having the early childhood education does not count. Next slide. These 3 benchmarks are pretty straightforward. A maximum class size of 20, a ratio of 1 adult to 10 students, and all children screened in vision, hearing, and at least 1 health screening. If the child screens positive, then there must be a policy in place that the child is referred for additional services and support. Next slide. For each city, only 1 program was selected for review. For those cities with multiple programs, we had to determine which one to look at. So the first one that we chose, or the one that we looked at, was the one that was administered, operated, and funded by the city with the greatest enrollment. If a city did not have a separate pre-K program from the state program, we then looked at the state program. Some cities have multiple state programs operating within their city. So in that instance, we picked the state program with the greatest enrollment that was operating within the city. Next slide. The data collection, and this part gets a little complicated, and I thought I would walk you through it. But please, again, if you have any questions, please type them in and I can respond after, kind of go through all of this. We rely on the research studies used in the yearbook. Thus, we need to follow the data collection timeline of the yearbook. The most recently completed one was released in spring 2019, which analyzed the 2017-2018 school year. Our process of collecting data and verifying it takes almost a year for us to go through that process. So for the quality, we looked at the 2017-18 school year for all of your programs. We started with the yearbook data, then reviewed websites, manuals, other research, and contacted many of you directly. And again, just thank you so much for all of your help and guidance in helping us find the right information to answer our questions. Once our analysis was complete, we sent verification tables and probably lots of questions to many of you to either the city lead or the lead or leads between July and September 2019. And then within the past 2 weeks, I've sent you additional kind of a summary of where our determinations of the benchmarks and the enrollment threshold. If you do not receive those, please let me know. For enrollment, we tried to get the most current data starting with the 2019-2020 school year. If that was not available, then we looked at the 2018-2019 school year. Also, the actual count, if possible, would be great. If not, funded slots were kind of our third choice. And then finally, if none of those were available, we looked at the estimates based on the NIEER yearbook data and applied those percentages. Next slide. Bronze medals were awarded if the city enrolled 30% of the students. And no matter how many, actually, let me start with gold because it's easier. Sorry to explain. If you were able to receive a gold medal in pre-K if you met 8 out of the 10 NIEER benchmarks and enrolled over 30% of children, 4-year-old children, in a pre-K program. If you met 8 out of the 10 benchmarks, but did not quite get that enrollment threshold, the city was awarded a silver medal in pre-K. Then for those cities that enrolled a lot of children, but only met fewer than 8 of the 10 benchmarks, then they received a bronze. For those cities that had 7 or lower benchmarks and not quite 30% enrollment, received no medal. Next slide. Oh, I think there's a slide before that, maybe. If not, I might be at, that's okay. I can come back and talk after about if you have any questions about actually, maybe it's the next slide, probably. We go the other way. There, sorry, I'm just going to talk about this and then we'll go back. So again, there's my name and my email. And so I sent you an information. If you do not receive it, put in my name and just email me or my email address. If this information that I sent is correct, please email me back by Friday, November 1st, because we're in really the final stages of finalizing all of the information. If you think the program that we are looking at meets more benchmarks, or you think the enrollment count is incorrect, please let me know and we can set up a time to talk. We can also, and I also will need to see information, and some of you I've already spoken to about what kinds of information I would need to be able to see to verify that you in fact did meet a benchmark or that the enrollment counts were slightly different than what we had reported. And I think I'm going to hand this over to Liz now and she can go back to the slide before. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you, Gigi. Thank you so much for having us and just being on this webinar with us today. You know, this report that we're about to put out is really all about the importance of policies like pre-K, and we just can't tell you how much we respect and value the work that you're doing in your cities to advance pre-K in your own cities and deliver key services for kids. So we are announcing the next report results on November 13th, so really only a couple weeks away. The data across all of our 9 policies, which will be featured in this report, not just pre-K, has been distributed to officials in each of the 40 cities that we are assessing. We have a wide audience of policymakers are going to be invited to a webinar where they can review their city's final data the day before the release. Everyone on this call, if you would like to hop on that call, is absolutely welcome. But, you know, it's also for policymakers who work on, you know, the 8 other policies that CityHealth assesses. So we are circulating that information as widely as we can amongst key policy makers in the cities. If you or any of your colleagues would want to be on that webinar, it will take place on November 12th, and you can email me and I will get you the Zoom registration information to be a part of it. So thanks again for having me, and let me know if there are any other questions about the report.
Great. Thanks so much, Liz. This is Catherine again. Michelle, oh, perfect. Can we go back one slide, please? Oh, no, you're reminding folks how to ask a question. Even better. So actually, Michelle, can you remind folks how to ask a question? And then we'll go back to that contact slide in just a minute, just so everybody can see emails and contact information. So we've had one question come in that I want to make sure we address right up front. This is from Deanna. What type of documentation is needed to illustrate professional development models? It's a great question. Gigi, do you mind handling this one?
Sure. No, and for the professional development, and I know I'm just getting lots of questions, also emails about that, the three things that we look at are the hours and whether or not all teachers, both lead teachers and assistant teachers, are required to participate in at least 15 hours. So that can be in either the guidance or the implementation manual of the program. If it's a program that you contract out to other providers, it would be stipulated even within that contract, perhaps. Each of your cities operate slightly differently, so feel free to reach out to me about that. The coaching model, we don't look specifically at what the coaching model is, but that all teachers are required to participate in coaching. And again, we looked at specifically the 2017-2018 school year to make this determination. So if you have evidence to show me that all teachers were required to participate in coaching during that time frame, that's sort of the one element that some of you have questions about.
Excellent. Thank you, Gigi. That was great. So I have another question here. How often are cities evaluated on their health policies? So I'm going to take this one. We release a yearly report, as Liz just noted, where we evaluate all 40 cities across the 9 policies. That's when we award the overall medal. And in the past 2 years, we've released that report every November. And it's where we are attempting to make sure that cities know where they are falling in terms of the presence or absence or strength of a particular policy. It is also an opportunity to directly connect with folks within communities that are interested or are working on a specific area or potentially interested in trying to improve their medal status. So let me move on to another question. Will there be any information on how cities are doing on the other health policies? I think I just answered this question, but let me turn it over to Liz and see if there is some additional information there that might be useful.
Yep, just as Catherine mentioned in the beginning when she went through all 9 of the policies, all of those will be assessed in this report. So again, Catherine kind of went over it, but sometimes it takes a minute to kind of fully understand the scoring methodology. So on each one of those 9 policies, all 40 cities will receive a medal. And then those roll up to the overall medal. And she went through kind of how we give gold, silver, and bronze, quote, overall medals. So really, all 40 cities receive 10 medals in this report. They receive 1 medal for each of the 9 policies, including pre-K, and then on top of that, they receive an overall medal.
That's great. Thank you, Liz. And we have a question from Shantae. What documentation is needed to show the evidence of curriculum supports? And Gigi, I think you're probably the best suited to answer Shantae's question.
Sure. It would be, if it's done at the city level specifically, information on either a listing of when the kind of professional development opportunities are offered, kind of when they're offered and who they're offered to. It also might be funding to programs directly to help with their enhancement of their curricula. Might be another place that we have found evidence of that, or kind of in your budget that you have money available for implementation support. If your coaching model, and all teachers are required to participate in coaching, and coaching includes fidelity, or looking at fidelity of curricula, is another place that we look at for that information.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Gigi. So we have a great question from Natalie. You mentioned that technical assistance may be offered to the 40 cities where appropriate. Please elaborate. Great question. So we don't ever work in a community that isn't interested in working with us. So if you are interested in learning more or potentially figuring out if there are ways that CityHealth can either provide direct technical assistance on a particular policy or potentially offer support for a local grassroots coalition, or do something like polling. We have supported some cities to look at the attitude and the appetite for a particular policy change. I believe Gigi has been very gracious and has put her email up here for folks who are interested specifically, obviously, in pre-K work, but we can help triage requests around other forms of support. I think Gigi mentioned earlier that we currently are supporting, and which many of you are a part of, the Pre-K Learning Network, which has been it's been a joy to work with you all who are, as Liz mentioned, actually doing the work of supporting young children and their families in their early years. But it's also something where we're happy to entertain ideas, options, opportunities for directly providing some support, some resources for you all as you think about how to do this work more effectively. I have one additional question. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, Catherine. I was just going to add on, too. One of the other things that we have been doing is developing a series of webinars. And so there was a webinar last month on dual language learners, and there's going to be one on November 12th, which we will send you all invitations to, on supporting a workforce, kind of developing and recruiting a workforce. So we'll be talking to some of our higher ed partners within cities, as well as some of the other alternatives cities have used to create alternative pathways, as well as kind of addressing the salary equity issue and how do you develop that and get to pay parity.
Gigi, thank you so much for mentioning that. That's a great resource. And those topics were actually developed by the Pre-K Learning Network, and they have been really helpful so far. So there's one additional question here that I want to make sure we touch upon. And Liz, I think you will probably be the best person to answer this question. Do you have any materials to help us communicate the CityHealth work and how well cities are doing?
Why, yes, we do. So we have a page on our website that really houses all of that content. So our website is cityhealth.org, and then the page you're looking for is /reports. So on that page, you'll find a few materials specific to pre-K. One is the last annual report we released in 2018, which basically just has information on the medals for each city. Then in January, we put out our first policy-specific report, and we chose to report. That report was written in partnership with NIEER. And so that is probably the kind of immediate piece of content we have about pre-K. And then we've also just got what's called a pager. That's really good for meetings with stakeholders to maybe kind of bullet out what pre-K is. This is how it benefits kids. This is the evidence base. And here is where each of the 40 cities that CityHealth has assessed, this is where they stand. So we can also email those out to this group and just send you all the links so that they're easy to find. But you can also find them at cityhealth.org.
And we just shared those links in the chat as well.
Thanks, Michelle. That was great.
And this is Gigi again. I know some of you are emailing me lots of questions, and please feel free to keep emailing me. It's really important for us that we accurately reflect the work that you're doing in your city. And so please keep asking me questions, and also so that we can be as transparent and as clear as possible about how we think about cities and quality. And I just want to encourage you to keep reaching out to us.
That's great. Michelle, could we actually go back one slide to make sure that folks can see Gigi's email address? I just want to make sure folks have that in front of them. And one thing I just want to note is for some folks who are asking very specific questions about what counts for the benchmarks, We are happy to follow up after the webinar and answer your question directly. I just want to make sure that the vast majority of questions we're answering today are about, kind of process, the general communication, steps that we are taking, and for individual questions, we will actually address those one-on-one, which I hope you all will find useful, and then that way that the information that we're sharing more broadly is applicable to everyone on the webinar.
And I do see a question and a comment about that Deanna asked about the dual language learners. And currently, that is not one of our benchmarks, is looking at the dual language learners specifically. The only place that it's sort of included a little bit is in the early learning and development standards. We at NIEER are continually always looking at what are the outcomes that we need to support high quality program, or what are the policies that we need to support high quality programming. And that's always a conversation that we're always looking at. But currently that is not one of the specific benchmarks. It's something that we think is critical and important to having a good quality program.
That's a great point, Gigi. Thank you for doing that. So Michelle, if we could go forward a couple of slides in terms of how to connect, I will turn it over to you in just a minute. But I just wanted to say thank you all so much for giving up some time on your Friday to talk with us, to ask good questions, to engage. I just want to reiterate, we are so proud to work directly with you and to have an opportunity to engage with you on this really important work that you all are leading. And so just give you an incredible thanks and appreciation from all of us here at the CityHealth team. And do reach out and let us know how we can be of assistance. And also if there are individual questions specifically about the pre-K benchmarks, we are happy to entertain them. I also want to thank Liz and Michelle and Gigi today for being great sports and providing a lot of great information. It was incredibly helpful, and I really appreciate all of your help. So with that, Michelle, I will turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Catherine. So that, I believe, concludes our webinar. You can reach us on Twitter and Facebook at all of the following handles on your screen. We will share the recording from the webinar as well as the slides and some of the links and emails that Gigi and Liz and Catherine mentioned today via email either today or next week. So we'll be in contact with all of you. Thank you all so much for joining us on this Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.